Hi and welcome to Immersion. In this session I'm very pleased to welcome Executive Director of the Australian Copyright Council, Fiona Phillips, to chat with us about copyright and the things that we need to be considering to make sure we're not in breach of copyright law when creating content for learning. My name's Karen Maloney and I'm the Community Director of the eLearning Experts and your host for this session. While our guest speaker is waiting patiently in the wings, I'll just give you a bit of a background on her. Fiona Phillips is a highly regarded advocate of copyright law with a lifelong interest in the arts and has spent 20 years advising government and the private sector on copyright law and policy issues. After being called to the bar in 1996 and appearing in the Supreme, Federal and High Courts, Fiona joined the Australian Attorney General's Department, where she was instrumental in a number of major reforms, including the Copyright Amendment Moral Rights Act 2000, the US FTA Implementation Act 2004 and the Copyright Amendment Act 2006. During this time, she also represented the Australian Government on copyright issues at major international meetings, WIPO, APEC, and in free trade agreement negotiations. In recognition for her work with the AGD, Fiona was a recipient of an Australia Day Award. Fiona's extensive career has also included positions as Special Counsel at independent commercial law firm Bankie Haddock Fiora and Assistant Deputy General Counsel at the ACCC, or Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. Fiona's full bio is on our session page on our website, but for now I think that probably gives you a flavour of the experience that Fiona has in the area of copyright law and brings to the table here. So I'm very pleased to have her contribute her wealth of knowledge to this event. So welcome Fiona, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much Karen, and hello everybody.
Okay, so before we get stuck into the nitty-gritty of copyright as it pertains to curation, can you just give us a quick overview of what copyright is and what it protects?
Sure. So copyright is a form of intellectual property, so it's a property right in an intangible. So what that basically is, it gives the owner a set of exclusive rights to control the use of their material. And that could be anything from text, images, computer software, video content, music, you know, even the doodle that you do on the page while you're perhaps listening to this webinar could be protected by copyright. And I suppose the key points of difference and the challenges it will present for people curating learning sessions, Karen, is that copyright arises automatically and there's no registration system.
Okay.
So it means that there's a whole lot of stuff out there and it won't immediately be apparent whether or not it's protected by copyright. And one of the biggest misunderstandings is that if it's on the internet, it's available for use and it's free. And just because it's there doesn't mean you can always use it. There might be some other things you have to do.
Okay, so that kind of segues nicely into my next question. So I was thinking about, you know, this event is all about how we in L&D can take existing content and curate it for use as learning experiences in our organisations, because we're all kind of, you know, struggling with this whole having to move very quickly and people are kind of bypassing us and Googling things, and we need to be getting on board with, you know, what we can curate that's useful, what can we get quickly, and also what we can get cheaply as well, because in L&D we're always challenged with that budget issue. I think there are a few organisations in the world, probably a handful of them, that have extensive L&D budgets, and they're very, very lucky people, but the majority will be operating on a very tight, if non-existent budget. So again, I think this is probably the biggest area of danger. So where we've got, you know, this sea of content online on free platforms like YouTube, which give us the ability to instantly and easily embed and share content. And in a lot of cases, that's kind of what the authors of that content want. They want their content to go viral, to be shared. But it's interesting that you should sort of say that you know, that there's kind of an instant copyright as soon as you create something. So I think people might assume that, you know, anything that doesn't have that little copyright symbol that's on the screen there is kind of open season, and it's rare that you see any other kind of terms and conditions for people, you know, for use around particular content. So can you just talk to us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So it's good practice, and we certainly encourage people to use a copyright notice, but it's not necessary for copyright to subsist. So and also, as you've rightly recognised, people feel a real imperative to put their material out there. So we've got a lot of material out there and people aren't necessarily thinking in top copyright terms and putting a copyright notice on it. So rather than assume that it is in the public domain, what I would recommend is assuming that copyright does subsist in it, that it is protected by copyright. So then the thing is, and you said, well, there's not usually any terms and conditions. But the reality is, Karen, that certainly even if the individual creator of content might not have included terms and conditions, websites and social media platforms that might be hosting the material all are subject to terms and conditions. Those are the boring things that we all flick past.
Exactly, we do just ticks that button when they create their accounts, don't they? And they don't actually read it.
But that's where you will find, so on a website, that's where you'll find the terms and conditions, and that's a useful place to look, or at the bottom of the website. Or, I mean, to use a local example for me, we publish a host of free information sheets on our website. And if you actually go and download one of the websites, we let people use them for free for personal use. But as soon as that transitions over to some other kind of use, like for commercial purposes, then we say, well, you need to actually seek our permission.
Okay.
So, and that might, and so that's the kind of thing that you have to be on the lookout for. So it's not immediately, I mean, some websites are constructed that a dialogue box will kind of appear, and but that's less common. Usually you have to hunt around a little bit to satisfy yourself what the terms and conditions are.
And would it be right to say that, you know, in your experience, you think a lot of people that actually create materials themselves are not aware of their copyright rights?
Absolutely, absolutely. But they're also not aware of the terms and conditions they're perhaps signing on to. So, you know, if you think of any of the big social media platforms, people aren't generally aware, for example, that if they put their photographs, you know, their family photos on Facebook, for example, that they're actually giving Facebook a really wide license to sub-license that material. And so then, you know, we sometimes get queries from people who are absolutely shocked that the image of their child with the family dog has appeared on some advertising. So I think that's entirely correct, Karen. People often don't think that far, but I suppose what you want to avoid is any obstacles that are going to prevent you from using the material because somebody complains after the event, or anything that's going to affect your reputation as a service provider. Yeah.
So I think probably, the point I'm sort of getting here is that it's our responsibility as curators to make sure that we've investigated you know, the copyright implications of using that material.
Yeah, and I don't want to cause people, you know, to be inhibited, because I think curation of content is a really, you know, smart idea. What I'm stressing is it's a matter of sensible risk management.
Yes, of course.
You know, not just assuming everything's okay, making some sensible inquiries to satisfy yourself that what you're doing is okay.
That's fair enough, and I think probably part of this event, and we sort of talked about having a strategy document, and there's a few things that we're actually creating as I speak, to some resources that we can give people, some practical things. I think one of those things is actually creating some kind of just quick policy or process around, we know when we're curating content, what is our process for checking what copyright is applicable to the information that we're looking to use, and have we kind of followed the right steps to make sure that we're not infringing any laws or rights.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's when we were talking about that section just then, I was talking about maybe kind of taking some text or referring to a white paper, or you know, using a YouTube video. What about links to content? Because that's something that's obviously quite prolific online.
Absolutely, and linking is always, at least in Australia, going to be less problematic than actually cutting and pasting or
Okay.
embedding content. So linking to content is a really good way of managing your risk. And so if I again refer to the Copyright Council as an example, we let people link to our information sheets all the time. What we don't like is when people actually download the PDF and put it on their website.
Yep.
And the reason for that is that material can become out of date, and we just, and then it's got our brand on it and we've lost control of it.
Yep, and that's fair enough. Okay. So
linking is a great option, but obviously you want to provide variety for your you know, your learners, and so you want to present information in a variety of ways. So sometimes you will want to, you know, copy and paste text. You will want to embed videos, for example. That's fine, but that's where you need to just apply a little bit more risk management than you would if you're just copying and pasting a link.
Yep, that's fair enough. And with those links, it's kind of sufficient just to hyperlink in the normal way. Do we have to accredit a source in, you know?
No, because that will take them.
It will just take them directly to the source. Okay.
Yeah. So the only thing you might need to be careful about is that you're getting it from the original source, and that's one of the, you know, challenges of the internet. It's just, it could be that the material is being republished from another source, so you just want to make sure that the originator is attributed somewhere along the line. You particularly see that, you know, on social media with, you know, Twitter and stuff. People have, you know, retweeted things and the original person gets lost. So that would be my only caveat in relation to linking. Otherwise,
I think that's quite I think that's quite an important one for us. I mean, because if we're creating and curating, if we are curating resources to include as part of, you know, learning pathways and journeys and different things, we're not expecting that material to be going out of date overnight. So I think it's important to make sure as one of those steps in that process is to make sure that we are actually referring to material from the source, so that if it does change, that we get that updated material, or, you know, have some way of kind of backtracking. Otherwise, it could get a bit messy.
Oh, and you don't want your resource to be full of broken links.
No, absolutely. And that's just a whole other job in itself.
Absolutely.
When we were preparing for this session, we spoke briefly about layers of copyright. Can you just elaborate for me on that for our audience, please?
Yes, because copyright subsists in about everything that you could think of, it's very unusual that you will just be dealing with one type of copyright. So, for example, a website, you'll have copyright in the code, you know, the computer code, which is protected as a literary work. There'll be the text on the website. There'll be the images, any moving images, which will be protected as a film. Any, you know, music will be. So there's all these different layers of copyright, and they might not all be owned by the same person. So that's where it can get a little bit tricky. But presumably, if they are all included in one source, if you contact the website publisher, for example.
So there's going to be a place where it is published and a reference to somebody that's involved in the creation of that material in some way, shape or form. So that would be your start point.
Absolutely. And so the trick will be, you know, if they've sourced content from elsewhere, whether they're in a position to give you permission to use that other content, or you actually have to go elsewhere. So that's where it can get a little bit tricky. But it's just I don't want to inhibit people. It's just something to flag that you know, the deeper you go, there probably are a range of copyrights. There.
And I think probably, you know, we're looking at trying to get people to sort of introduce curation as something that supports the learning and enables us to respond to a need quickly in learning, but also just sort of to say, be able to sort of provide some bigger, wider picture. So, for example, people curating news from an industry and things like that. I mean, I think there are already some great tools around that allow you, that clearly kind of, show sources and allow you to create kind of in a white hat manner, if you like, a respectful manner. But I think that I think probably what, and in you saying kind of we don't want to scare people off, we also have to bear in mind as well that we're not going to have millions of pieces of curated content as part of learning. Well, I wouldn't see it being that way. I would see it being, we're going to look at a sort of an introductory course to management, for example, for people looking to step up, and maybe there's a few kind of key bits, some TED Talks and things like that we can refer to sort of, string together with some good instructional design underneath them that will allow us to quickly and easily produce a piece of learning. Well, it's just kind of one way, but if you were going to do that, you would be thoroughly investigating each of those X number of bits of content to make sure that they are, it's easy to maintain them, that they are quality and that they've come from the right source. So I think just for those listening, if you start kind of thinking, oh God, this is a massive undertaking and we've got to go through this process for every single piece of content that we curate, I don't think it's going to be as much as you maybe think it is.
No, look, I think if you turned your mind to the issues beforehand, you're way ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the beauty of dealing with content online is, if there's a problem, you can deal with that, easily, quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep, absolutely.
So,
okay. Is there a difference? So I'm asking this question really because our audience is a mixed bag of people working, some within learning departments of organisations, as some are producing e-learning for those organisations or producing that content to sell on as their own kind of product. Is there a difference of use of content in relation to copyright if I'm, say, within an organisation for internal training rather than a product that I'm looking to sell and refer to that content in?
Look, there is... strictly speaking, there probably isn't. There are some exceptions for copyright for private research or study, but that is not generally going to apply to an institution or an organisation. However, I think the main difference would be, Karen, is in managing the risk. That probably, if somebody has a problem, they're not going to mind as much if it's the product is being used in a contained kind of way, for example, in internal training. But if it's being used commercially, and the person who has, some original source material, the person who's created that is not benefiting from that in any way, that's when they might be annoyed. And so that's probably why you want to attribute them so at least they get, some benefit flowing back to them.
Yep.
But yeah, so that would be, the main difference would just be in risk management, not strictly from a legal perspective.
Yeah, and I think there obviously, that can all be negated by making that contact up front and just saying, is it okay if I use this piece of content that you've created for this purpose? And then you can have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We touched briefly on budget as one of the big drivers for curation earlier back. But so let's say I don't really have any or much budget to pay for a copyright license or the time to wait to seek permission to use the content, because obviously you can contact people, you have to allow a lead time for them to actually get back to you. So are there any places I can go to find content I can use without permission or payment?
Well, you referred earlier to TED Talks, Karen, and that's a really good example of really popular and, really high quality material that is out there that's actually made available subject to Creative Commons license. So most people would have heard of Creative Commons.
Yeah.
So that is a system, and it is nothing other than licensing, where people make material available on the internet for free. Now there are a variety of different Creative Commons licenses. The basic license is called the CC BY license, so that just requires attribution. But the thing to do is to just check what the particular license is. For example, some Creative Commons licenses will stipulate that you can't use it for commercial purposes, so that's where that last issue we were talking about would be relevant. Or some say that you can't make derivatives, so that meant you wouldn't be able to change it. And others are called share-alike licenses, which require you to so the share-alike licenses require you to then make your material available on the same terms.
Right.
So Creative Commons can be a great source, and also, people might not be necessarily using the Creative Commons system, but they'll just say, look, I'm happy for you to use it. So, so there is a lot of material out there. There's also, stock libraries where you can often get material relatively cheaply, for example, for stock images, for example. But, Creative Commons doesn't just apply to images. You can get Creative Commons music, all manner of copyright material. So that's, look for that CC symbol. And we, in fact, have an information sheet about Creative Commons.
Okay, we'll put a link to that
on our website.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing there is to remember that, to note that there is more than one types of Creative Commons license, because I do hear people talking about it, in the fashion of kind of, oh, yeah, we can use that because it's Creative Commons, but understanding that you need to check the terms of each of the licenses for the things that you are looking to use to make sure that you are using them appropriately.
Yeah, that's right. Because if you haven't actually complied with the terms of the Creative Commons license, you're in fact using the material outside the terms of the license, which could potentially be viewed as infringing copyright.
Yep.
So, one, it's good practice, but yes, two, there actually is some legal ramifications.
And again, I think probably the people that are listening to this understand what goes into creating a piece of content, whether that's a video or a blog post or a PDF or whatever it might be. And I think probably just having that respect for others, and as much as not just kind of taking what they've done and pulling it into our thing, but understanding, as authors and creators ourselves, just probably pay it back a little bit and just have respect for the people that have put the time and the effort and the talent into creating the content that you want to use for your own purposes. Okay.
Absolutely, and that's really, online communities are oftentimes a much more effective way of regulating the use of content than the law itself, because there are certain standards that people apply in the online world, and people who don't observe those standards
don't go down too well in those communities.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Okay, well, that's been really useful. Thank you, Fiona. There's a few resources there that I'll put links to on our event page, but I really enjoyed hearing your views and topics and your views and advice on this topic, because I think everybody else out there would. I think it's not, look, I don't think it's kind of rocket science stuff, but I think it's just something that we need to be mindful of when we are looking to go into curation, and just having some awareness around this and some, kind of standard steps in our curation process. So, we will have places that we go to find this content, and then when we find the content, as part of the filtering process, we need to go through some steps to check that we are making sure that we're observing any copyright laws or license terms that we need to. So if you'd like to contact Fiona, you can find her details on the session page of our website, and you can follow the Australian Copyright Council, I'll just pop it up on screen there, on Twitter as AusCopyright, and the website is www.copyright.org.au. There's a few good resources on there actually. I'm going to put links to And there's also a book as well that's about copyright for people creating training materials. So we'll put those links there for everybody to have a look at. So for those of you watching this video who are inside the Immersion event, you'll find a summary of the key points and actions from this session in the action section, plus some other resources for further research and an offer from the Australian Copyright Council for discounted access to their online course on copyright essentials. So if you haven't already registered, you can find more details on our website, the elearningexperts.com.au/about-immersion. Just up on the screen right now. I just want to say thank you again to Fiona. Really appreciate your time to contribute to this session. And thanks for everybody listening to the session. I hope you found it useful.